come to work, so my peoples come first. I got worldwide family all over the earth, and I worry about them all for whatever it's worth.
Here we are. The problem that we're trying to solve is that blockchain hasn't been for everyone so far. We're really, I think we're pretty far from mass adoption. Let's start with devs. What problems are you solving in blockchain adoption or onboarding? Danny, do you want to start? We kind of talked about surface friction, gas fees, optimization, clear distribution problems. Give us your thoughts.
Sure. So I think that obviously everyone's jumped in here with like the promise of the change that blockchain technology can bring on. But once you come in from the developer side and start building applications, it can be a very challenging and frustrating experience as you're navigating the sort of new tool sets and the way that all these decentralized tools interact with each other. So I think that what we're doing that is really different is like Near has a focus on both not just scalability, but also like usability, both from the developer side and from the end user's perspective. So kind of simplifying things to, as easy as they can be. And you can make them complex if you have the skills to be more advanced. There's a million things you can kind of go out and do. But if you are just getting started, and you're new, you're exploring the space, there's kind of like the beginner's mode and like blockchain on training wheels that you can activate and just get started there until you're comfortable kind of moving away from that. And I think that makes a huge difference in terms of lowering the barrier for entry for new developers, new people who want to participate in this ecosystem.
You can jump on in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Susie, and for BSIC for doing this talk and for having us here. It's really exciting, and it's always great to talk with Danny and Dennison, who are just total legends, and so excited to chat. I come from an education position here, where even though we do developer relations, which means presenting to conferences and writing technical material, the bulk of my work right now is teaching boot camp, sort of the blockchain developer boot camp, which is a very interesting challenge with developers, because typically folks who are self-teaching blockchain are self-taught learners in general. And so they're typically familiar with JavaScript and Node. And it's a very, the JavaScript community is a very like DIY, very sort of choose your own adventure career path, as well as technical, like the technical skills you'll gain. And for blockchain, you actually kind of do require a more extensive knowledge path. Like, why, you could just theoretically throw somebody in there, but, you get very confused very quickly about why you need to sign transactions, why you're not seeing immediate effects, that sort of thing. And so, I think it's something that's lost on, educational stuff that we try to emphasize a lot. And I know that both Danny and Dennison, at ETH Global events, we'll be doing kind of just intro education stuff. And it seems really 101, but for a lot of people, for the vast majority of not even just human people, but also just developers, they don't know what blockchain is. And so it's really important to just be able to be very realistic with where we are with adoption, and not throw people in talking about layer 2 solutions and flash loans, but sort of getting in just like very basic stuff about what is consensus, what are distributed systems, that sort of thing.
Dennison, I hope you raised more money than you need. We're talking about what problems you're solving in blockchain adoption or onboarding. And I know you've got your opinions on everything from gas fees and surface friction.
Indeed. So, what we had built at Dapp Hero, for example, was there's this idea that, when you come to blockchain, for us, blockchain feels inevitable, right? Like distributed technologies feels inevitable. It feels like the future. But to a lot of individuals, especially skilled developers who exist outside of our ecosystem, in many ways, it actually just feels like the technology flavor of the week, right? There are a lot of technologies out there that solve different problems. You can make a strong argument that serverless is a good competitor to a lot of the features of blockchain itself. So one of the things that's really important that sometimes the ecosystem could do a better job of is recognizing that there's this necessity to give people this immediate magic moment when using blockchain, really solving a problem of like what you need this for. For example, you know, in our own research of you know, what developers outside of the blockchain community think of and are thinking about when they think about blockchain, the number one question is, okay, we love it, we get it, but why should we use blockchain, right? And there's this question that sometimes I think we fail to answer, which is, on a practical level, why should we use blockchain, right? Certainly DeFi is becoming really successful because that answers the question pretty conveniently, to make money, right? But when we talk about like blockchain for social impact, right, it's very important to think, okay, why blockchain? How is this really solving problems that people have? And right, maybe that's identity, maybe that's access to finance, right? Maybe it's these different things. But that's been a very big component of like what we've thought about at Dap Hero and what I've thought about in my career in blockchain.
What do you guys, what's your response to there's no point to blockchain unless you're making money or monetizing it somehow?
I definitely.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah. Just quickly. I mean, I definitely understand that perspective. I think, you know, to you know, a lot of the people who are taking our program want to get a better job, and I think that's a perfectly understandable situation. And for a lot of folks in this current economic situation globally, the idea of using a tech job to be able to move up in income levels is totally understandable. It's what I did personally. I think it's a very understandable maneuver. However, to Dennis's point, I think, you know, to strictly come into blockchain for that only reason, I personally think defies sort of some of the tenets of it, because, you know, centralized financial systems are working great for a certain number of folks, you know, and I think the real kind of shame with the resurgence of DeFi, and I've said this a few times before, is that financialization is not historically an inclusive and progressive institution, broadly speaking. It strictly extracts profit from systems while coring out a lot of the public goods and, you know, leveraging against public goods, and then sort of leaving the carcass for other folks to clean up. I mean, we see that in the United States in the 1980s with corporate raiders taking over companies with essentially no leverage, which you could make the argument that what happened with Sushi Swap, stealing leverage from Uniswap, was this example of a sort of a corporate similar standing, where you're able to use zero capitalization to then sort of leverage in this very unusual way. So I think one of my concerns, why I really appreciate it, I really appreciate you know, the draw of DeFi. I personally am concerned about a lack of awareness of the historical nature of financial institutions in our country and in our systems. And I actually do think there's something in the chat. Social impact is not at odds with making money. I actually do think it is at a deep level. I mean, I think this is why we don't see systemic change, is that it's actually actively to, you know, if companies were to actually commit to social impact, they, you know, we would see a redistribution of wealth. You know, so anyways, I think these are sort of hard topics and hard conversations to have right now, but I really feel like it's important for the crypto community to have. Otherwise, you are just going to become you know, Flash Boys 2.0.
Yeah, I would actually follow up on that a little bit and maybe throw out a different perspective. Financial inclusion or access to the financial system is very critical, right? But if we look back at like how reshaping how users like use their money, how that like sort of, you know, create social change. You know, speaking with someone just recently about this, you know, if you look back in the civil rights movement, right, and at the Atlanta bus boycott, right, the Atlanta bus boycott was successful not because, you know, African Americans asked nicely for a long time to have a more inclusive bus system. they abandoned the Atlanta bus system, right? They took their money out of the public transport system and kept it in their own communities. And it was that like redistribution of like where they were spending money, where they're spending their monetary power, that actually eventually forced the Atlanta bus system to come to terms and compromise, right? I'm a little bit of like an earlier generation in crypto where I still sort of imagine one day we take our money out of all the banks, and that, you know, how we spend it and where we put our money is a big part of the leverage. And while, yeah, I think today DeFi is a bit smoke and mirrors in terms of like why we're here in general, it's still a part of the flywheel mechanism early on of extracting money out of centralized, unfair, discriminatory systems, right? Like SushiSwap, yes, it's not exactly the pinnacle of like, you know, personhood's great accomplishments, but it certainly represents a step towards, oh, if you do this to Uniswap, what if we did this to like Citibank, right? And you know, Citibank, I love you guys, you know, we're besties. But that kind of idea of like what we can start to do with capital and how that affects like, you know, social impact and what can be done, right? Because you can take money out of like predatory lending, right? Look at Aave's new lending protocol system, right? If you could take money out of predatory lending, right, for all sorts of things, from like farmers who are forced to take loans to cover their living expenses before they get paid for their crop, these type of things, we could affect great social change, even if we move the sort of like ship forward a little bit off the back of making money. So.
What tools or programs are exciting to use to a developer, to a non-dev? You know, I'd like for you to kind of pivot towards the audience just a bit. What do you recommend, just to kind of focus us on what we can do to onboard this audience? Danny, you want to go?
Yeah, totally. So just kind of actually like going up after what like Dennison had mentioned about finding ways to really like not necessarily subvert the system, but maybe take a different approach, right? Like an app that I really, really like that's been an incredible way to start onboarding real people onto like Web3 is something called Pull Together, and it's a no loss lottery. So what it's doing is like, if you look at kind of like the stats around lottery tickets, just in the US, apparently like people spend like $73 billion in lottery tickets every year. And it's usually people who like are just, you know, they're taking on people who are like working people day to day, they have a little bit of money, they put in a lottery ticket and they kind of just like hope that's gonna come together, and it captures that much of the market. Versus with something like Pull Together, you you know, buy some crypto, turn it into DAI, put it into this pool, everyone pulls their money together, it generates an interest over a certain amount of time, and then the winner is announced, and the winner gets the interest from that pool, and everyone else essentially gets their money back and carries over to the next cycle. So you're never losing. You can only kind of like buy more tickets and up your chances, but your capital stays intact, and the winnings come from the collective gains of the group. So I think that's a really interesting sort of approach, and it's like a new financial primitive that's out there, and it's something that appeals to people because you still get the thrill of like, you know, the hope that you might win, and it might be something that makes a difference, right? But you don't need to actually lose your ticket money in order to have pretty much like similar odds, I would say. So
Coogan, what do you, that's really cool. I'm going to check that out. What's another dApp, Coogan, that would be an easy entry point for beginner blockchain enthusiasts?
Yeah, I won't say a dApp exactly, but I'm gonna talk just a little bit about, because I know Rhonda Eldridge is here in the audience, and she was a DEF CON scholar that Susie and I know. And Rhonda does a lot of great education in the Bahamas, and I sort of wanted to talk about some of the scholarship work that we do with Bootcamp, because one of the issues with becoming a developer and coming into this space is it's very easy to initially kind of come in, but then and you have a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement, but it's a little bit like riding a bike on a beach and you get into like the loose sand and it just kind of slows down at a certain point. So one of the things that we did with this cohort that just started is we have 10 organizations that have selected 10 students from their own regions. This is like Haiti, South Africa, South America, really exciting and really cool NGOs and nonprofits. And not only do they select 10 really, excellent software developers who are interested in learning about this, the NGO then also promises to coach and walk folks through the material as well. And so, and as a result, we sort of, we give access to those 10 students. And so we have about 50-50. Yeah, Rhonda's saying that Jamaica, folks from Turkey, Connecticut, Cayman Islands. It's just this really awesome way to walk people through this material that can be very challenging sometimes and introduce them to really cool ideas. I just thought it was a really novel, it's not like cutting edge technology, but I do think it's kind of this like sort of 101 stuff that we need to be doing just to make sure that people are going together. We have about 250 developers right now who are going to be up to speed by the end of the cohort in a couple months. I think that's really exciting and really cool, and the work that Rhonda and others are doing is great in that regard.
Thanks, Coogan. Dennison, what would you like to add?
There are some tools that in the ecosystem that remain sort of like the key standard bearers in the ecosystem. I really want to give a shout out to Remix, which at the end of the day always ends up being my go-to tool for like getting something done really quickly. And they've taken like a lot of steps forward to like be more user-friendly, to add more features to support. I think maybe they're even starting to support more blockchains. I might be wrong about that, but they have a lot of like plugins that you can use from there. That's a really friendly way to just get started and to like really dive into Solidity programming. Of course, I used to work for Open Zeppelin. I'm a huge fan. They simplify the process of like building secure tools, right? Because they already have this big code base of audited smart contract code, so you can really get started from there. So those are kind of like my go-tos always. But once you get past that, if you're coming in as a front-end developer, the graph is an awesome resource, right? That sort of like bridges your ability to start taking the web development skills that you already have and already start connecting directly into smart contracts and getting the data out of them. So yeah, those are some great tools. There's so many. I could run on and on, but yeah, those are probably my like first go-tos. But there's a lot.
That's great. And Tegan Klein's following up this panel. She's with the Graph, so that was a nice shout out. A year ago, we were all getting ready for DevCon, and it's been postponed. It's been a slog of a year. I don't think any of us in this community has been like this grounded for such a long period of time. We're always flying around, seeing each other. Put your futurist hat on. What are you looking forward to in the new year? Like what would you dream of for blockchain? I know, Dennison, you've got this look on you. I'm gonna choose you first. What would you like if you had your like kryptonite or your magic wand rather? What would you like come up with to solve?
So on a personal level, those days that you get the big bucket margaritas and you all have a straw that comes out. You all share them and it wasn't going to kill you.
That's pre-COVID. No sharing. No breathing or sharing.
Will those days ever come back? The really long straws? I don't know. I have to say, surprisingly, without all the traveling, I have been vastly more productive, I'll be honest. I love the conference circuit. I always got sick on the conference circuit anyway with like the flu or like a sore throat or something. And this sort of just proves out my theory personally. But I don't know if I personally am looking forward to like a return to conferences, or maybe just one a year. I think at the high point, there was like one every 3 or 4 weeks. It it was not sustainable for me personally. But yeah, that's my future hat is, and actually has been for a long time, that this is not going away anytime soon. So I don't think, I'm not even gonna like bother. I think it's 2022 before we start talking about being easy going and sharing the margarita bowls. I think it's a long time away.
Yeah. Coogan, what do you think?
I love what Denison said. I was quoted in a CoinDesk article saying that like it was kind of not, people saying, oh, like we're getting more work done because there are no conferences is like a little short-sighted, but it's actually so true. I think no. I think it's really true. Like I want to go, off the record that that's actually the way that I feel. And to that end, I think ETH 2.0 is, I've been in the space since 2010, and ETH 2.0 is this thing that honestly was a little bit, I didn't think was ever going to happen, even about this time last year. And I'm personally really excited to see it, whether it thrives or crashes and burns is going to be extraordinary. And that's, slated to happen at the beginning of next year. So working on a lot of educational material to contextualize that for folks is on my bucket list of things to do. Why it's an important thing, why I can help with decentralization. I also think it would be really great if like what Denison said with sushi swap happens for like banks and for other institutions. I would love that. That'd be great. And I think, but ETH2 I think is extraordinary.
Danny.
Very cool, very cool. So on a similar note, I think that I obviously really miss sort of these in-person events. We're doing a hackathon right now. It's like called Hack the Rainbow. It's like a bridge between Near and Ethereum. And it's been hard to coordinate with people, around the globe. The hackathon lasts 2 weeks instead of 3 days. Everyone's up at different hours. I sort of miss that energy of just like everyone being together and just like going 3 days nonstop, no sleep, until it's done. So the energy, I think is really cool and I miss it. But, on the flip side, I think that having all this time to really go heads down and focus is really, really helpful for a lot of teams. And what's really cool about Near is that we already launched the mainnet several months ago, and it's working in terms of it's for like sharding functionality. So it's been able to take a lot of the extra computation load from some of the Ethereum dApps, and they just migrate over using this bridge that we launched a few weeks ago. And they just migrate the things that cost a lot of gas, and they bring it back to Ethereum. And so they can keep their bases like native to Ethereum, and their dApps native, and just simply essentially outsource the expensive gas and pull back the data that they need. So I think that as this comes through, I'm hoping that we'll see some really cool experiments and apps appear by the time next year rolls around, based on all the work that they're doing now. So I'm hoping for that breakthrough dApp to emerge. And then
okay, last question for you all. What is your favorite daily reading list? What's your must read every morning when you get up, or what do you recommend watching for the audience? Like, we want to know, like, Coogan, like, I know you are such a voracious reader. Tell us what you have to read every morning before you log on, or when you log on. What are the first things you read?
Etherscan to look at the price of ETH, I think, has probably been my morning ritual for the past 5 years. I think it is, I read a lot of Twitter, and Denison is really active on Twitter, and I'm not. I'm more of a lurker. But I'll check that out a lot. I check the Reddit a lot. I think, if I were being really great, I would say ETH Research. If you really want to have your head turned around backwards, check out ETH Research. It is the nerdiest citizen scientist group out there, and really heady stuff, but really fun. And then, of course, Week in Ethereum is the jam whenever that comes out.
Great. Danny, go for it.
Super. So I'm going to second Week in Ethereum. That's really good. That's Evan. Vanessa, really, really great roundup of what's happening all around the ecosystem. I get most of my news from the New York Times, maybe because I'm, you know, a New York lifer at this point, so that is my source of truth. But I also really like Hacker News. It's an aggregator. It's really quirky, and sometimes it has strange news, but sometimes it's really interesting little gems. So I just kind of like browse through it and see like what's, you know, what has it surfaced. And then I really, really like Airmail, and it's Graydon Carter's publication. So he left Vanity Fair and started that, and it's just really, really like high quality journalism with interesting opinions about culture, essentially. And so like the world, his thoughts on the world. So I think that's a pretty good selection.
And Dennison, you bring it home.
I'm going to second the New York Times as well there. I'm also a New Yorker. I love it. It is, for me, a great source of truth. I'm totally happy if they turn out to be biased. Whatever. It's my bias. On top of that, I got a subscription to Defiant by Camilla Russo. That has been probably a lifesaver in terms of like aggregating everything that happens in the DeFi ecosystem. And at this point, it's just like you can't both live a life, build a product, and keep track with what's going on in DeFi. So the Defiant has been probably one of the few subscriptions to you know, basically a blog that has been awesome. So I'm not paid by Camilla Russo to say this, but I highly recommend getting a subscription to the Defiant.
Well, I'm listening to her book on Audible right now, and she is actually a panelist later on this afternoon. So come back or stay on, all of you. I love you guys. What a colorful motley crew. I hope to see you guys in the new year or sometime, maybe DevCon 6, whenever it happens. Bogota, who knows? But in the meantime, I'll see you guys online and all around. And thank you so much for supporting Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition.